Hello and welcome to a tutorial where I'm going to show you how to make snow on trees in Rhino. And it's not going to be just a tutorial that you can only add snow on trees. It's going to be any kind of geometry. It's just that I'm going to be using a tree model as my base, right, to showcase how I approach this problem. So first thing that I want to mention is that I'm going to be using Vray for rendering, but it's not necessarily for Vray because the geometry that we're going to be creating is going to be a mesh, right? The snow is going to be a mesh, so it can be rendered out of any kind of rendering engine, but I am going to be using Vray because that's my go-to. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually get some sort of geometry in, and I could download it, but the nice thing about new version of Vray is that it has this chaos cosmos, from which you can, if you click on it, it's going to open up this tab, and it's basically a library of meshes, right? A library of proxies that you can use. So I'll go to 3D models here, go to vegetation, bam, 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 trees. Let's just find one. I guess we can use the pine. That looks nice. Scots pine. And I'll just import it into my 3D space, right? So that's the tree. And as you can see, the preview of that tree, since this is a proxy, right? So the preview is simplified. So one little thing that I need to do, and if you're not using Chaos Cosmos, you won't need to do this if you're just importing a mesh. But what I need to do is find my Scots Pine proxy, expand this, and representation, I will change this to high representation, right? So let's give it a second, a hot second, I guess. Come on. It is a heavy mesh, right? So it is going to take a little bit of time for it to actually show it to us. But I think, yeah, there we go. If we just wait long enough, this is the geometry that we have. And if I select it, again, we need to wait, because goddamn, there's a lot of polygons here. I believe it's around 1 million. If I type in what, I click, hit enter, oh, it's actually 3 million faces. So it's a lot of faces for us to deal with, right? And a lot of faces for Rhino to preview. So now, if I just hit render, I can show you how it's going to look like. Yeah. Make this. Can I make this smaller, please? Yeah, there we go. You know, there's no environment. It's a little bit boring. We will add a little bit of environment here later, but that's, you know, that's our form. If I zoom in, you can see that the detailing on it is pretty good. Okay. Come on, there we go. So it's a nice mesh. Okay, let's stop this. I want to add snow. So for this, we will be using Grasshopper. So just type in Grasshopper, enter, and it's going to pop up the Grasshopper window for you. And the logic of it is that we want to simulate snowfall on top of our tree, right? So we will create a bunch of points on top of the tree, like above the tree, and they're going to fall down on the tree, right? And those points then are going to be wrapped with a mesh. And that's how we're going to get our nice little snow. So the first thing is I want to reference in this mesh as a mesh. Set one mesh, bam. Right? So I just double click on the canvas, type in mesh, empty container pops up, and then I can just right click on it and set one mesh and click on the mesh and it gets referenced. And I will hide the tree in Rhino just so that we don't have duplicate previews, one from Grasshopper and one from Rhino. And one more thing that I'm going to do is I'll add bifocals somewhere here. You don't need to do this. This is just so that you can see what kind of components I'm using. Okay, so we have a mesh. Now I want to have a bunch of points above the mesh. And one way of how I do it is I just draw a rectangle, maybe in the top view, that engulfs my whole geometry, like that. Back to perspective, and I move it up above the tree. All of my points are going to be located inside of this rectangle, right? So I will create a curve component, curve. This one with the black hexagon icon, that's an empty container. Right-click on it, set one curve, and set my rectangle. Now I'm going to populate that curve with a bunch of points. And there are different ways of how to do it, but the fastest one is just using populate 2D. Populate 2D, enter. Curve goes into the region, like that, immediately creates a bunch of points inside of the curve. And then for the count here, we just need a number slider to control how many we will have. So let me just create a slider that says 50. Double click, type in 50, enter. Plug that into n, and you can see now we have 50 points, and I can control the amount of points that I have. So I'll start, like just for testing purposes, I'll do like 10 points, just to make sure that everything works, right? And nothing crashes. This is going to be a pretty heavy approach, but you know, snow is heavy. Anyway, now we want these points to go and hit the mesh, right? So basically, we want to have direction for how these points fall and onto the mesh. For that, I will be using probably mesh Vray. Intersect a mesh, so that's our tree, with a semi-infinite ray. Ray is basically like a direction, like a line, right? That just goes from one point to infinity until it hits something, right? So in this case, we are planning on starting the rays from these points and somehow making sure that they always hit the mesh. Mesh ray, there we go. So there are three inputs here. First one is mesh to intersect. That's our tree. I will not be plugging it just yet. Second one is point from which the ray starts. That is our populate 2D. All of these points right here. I will be connecting that. Actually, maybe we should kind of reshuffle this. Oh, nah, never mind. Let's do it this way. And third one is direction, you know, the direction of the lines, the direction of the rays. So for the direction, I actually need to have 2 points. Let me explain it this way. If I had a point somewhere here, right? And another one somewhere, I don't know, somewhere here, right? The direction between these points would be that, right? So for each of these points, I need a direction that will go to the bottom of the tree. And in doing so, we will make sure that it definitely will hit at least something, right? So, we will, how do we get that bottom point? We will take this mesh and we will create a bounding box around it. Just a box, right? Bounding box around this mesh. If you have multiple meshes, by the way, you can just right-click on the bounding box and choose Union Box right here. And then we want to get, in this box, we want to get a point that is right at the bottom of the box in the middle of the box, right? So I'm going to use evaluate box component. Plug in the bounding box to the B input, which is the box input. And now I can describe the position of the point in proportion to the length, width, and size and height of the box, right? So UVW, length, width, height. So our height is going to be 0, right? That's like the bottom of the box. And our length and width proportion is going to be 0.5, which is half. Half the length and half the width and 0 in height means that the point is going to be created right in the middle of the bottom of the box. 0.5. Connect to U, connect to V. Select this to highlight where the point actually is. It's right here. Perfect. That's what we want, right? So now, actually, to visualize it, if I were to just draw a line, and you don't need to do this, this is just for me to explain this visually, a line between the created point cloud and that single point that we've created at the bottom of the box, you can see these are the rays, or the directionality of the rays that we are going to be constructing, that we're going to be creating, right? The thing is that line is not, well, you can kind of use it as a vector, as a direction, but it's much nicer and cleaner if you just create vector between 2 points. Vector 2 pt. Okay, so it's the shortcut for it is vector 2 pt. Right? This one right here. Also asks for 2 points, and it has the unitize option. We don't care about that one. So our starting points are the point cloud right here, and our endpoint is always the evaluate box point, not plain point output, right? So we get direction, and we just connect it to our mesh ray D input. And now the last thing that we need to do to get the points projected onto our mesh is just connect our mesh to the mesh input right here. Bam. And we wait, because this is like 3 million polygons. So of course we wait. There we go, only 7 seconds. Well, only with 10 points, huh? But it's actually, I believe this component caches the mesh into RAM, into temporary memory. So if you change it right now, if you change the slider, see, it's not taking 7 seconds anymore, right? It's much faster. And now if I hide everything except the final output, you can see that the projected points just increase. So the question is, how many do we need? Well, I'll start with 2000. That seems like a decent number, right? I'll start with 2000. And that's what we get, right? That's what we get. We do get a few points here, but that's fine. That's fine. Let them be there. There's a little bit of snow accumulation here going on, but most of them are hitting the branches, which is great, which is what we want, right? So the output is points, intersecting points, and there are indeed nulls amongst these points. And the nulls are basically the points that don't hit the mesh, right? The points that just barely evade the mesh. So we need to clean up the nulls. And to do that, we will just use clean tree component, connect X to the tree input right here. And wherever it says nulls, remove nulls, that needs to be set to true. And it seems like by default it is, so we will just keep it. We won't change anything else. So now we don't have any more nulls here. And I can see that 1,900 locally defined values. That means 100 points missed out of 2,000. That's fine. Okay, next up, we need to wrap this into a mesh, right? Actually create the geometry from it. So I'm going to be using a plugin that is called Dendro, and you can get it from Food for Rhino, foodforrhino.com. Dendro. And I will just use points to volume component right here. Points to volume. It asks me for 3 things: points, radius, settings, right? So I do have points. I can give it radius, but I don't have settings. So under convert, I will always also find create settings component. Like so. Connect it. And here under settings, actually the only thing that I want to change is the voxel size, right? The voxel size is basically the resolution at which we're going to be calculating the wrapping of the mesh. It's the step size between, and don't worry about it. It's the resolution. And it's described in millimeters, right? So what's your resolution in millimeters? Well, in my case, it's millimeters because my units in Rhino are in millimeters. So I'm going to say, do we go for 100? Let's go for 100. So every 10 centimeters, there is going to be, like the step size or the resolution is going to be 10 centimeters, which is kind of big, but we will kind of fine tune it once we get this going. Then for points to convert, I will just be using my points, right, from the data tree, from clean tree, sorry. And for radius, I'm going to be using something that is, I believe it needs to be larger than the voxel. Yeah, it needs to be larger than the voxel size. So let's do 150 as our radius. Bam, that's done. Let me hide the points just so that you can see the output. And the output looks like, doesn't look great. That's fine. We'll make it work. The reason why it doesn't look great is because we don't have enough. We don't have enough points, right? We need more points. So I'm going to, for the count, I'm going to say, what about 5,000 instead of 2,000? Right? We need to give it some time to think, because we are reaching like 5,000 points. I mean that's a lot. But now it's becoming a little bit better, right? Just a tiny bit better. So let's do 10,000. And now we definitely wait. Just a little bit of a coffee break type of a situation. Come on, you can do it. By the way, did you know that you can skip ahead with your arrow keys on your either keyboard or laptop keyboard or whatever? The arrow keys skip ahead by 5 seconds on YouTube. Anyway, it's done. It is done, and we do have our output, right? We do have our output that seems to be doing just fine. I mean, right now we are only looking at the point cloud, so it's not that great, but I think it's going to be just fine once we kind of work on it a little bit more. So that's the volume that we get. The thing is that the output of the points to volume is a dendro volume. That's not good enough. We need this to become a mesh. So under convert, we will find volume to mesh, and we'll connect points to volume to mesh, like that. So basically the volume is going to be converted into a mesh. And it also asks for settings. So we already have settings here. We just connect them like so. Bada bing, bada boom. We have a mesh now. And you can see all of the little polygons here just working, right? We have a mesh, and it's 125,000 polygons. It's a lot, but still reasonable, I think. Still fine. So I could kind of go and filter this through and remove all of the small bits here and there, but who cares? I'm just going to use smooth mesh component here to smooth them out. And I will use, instead of one iteration, that's how many steps of smoothing it gives. I'll use like 3 steps, or maybe even more, like let's do 5 steps for smoothing iterations. Now when I look at this, you can see that everything becomes a little bit less blobby, a little bit more smooth, which is exactly what we want, right? We want the snow to be not as blobby. So then the last thing to do is to actually bake it out. We could do custom preview, swatch, white, show selected, show the tree, and you can see how it looks like with the tree. I think that looks good, right? So if it looks good, we just bake out, you don't bake out custom preview, you bake out the smoothed mesh, right? So you right click, you select bake it to default, hit OK, it's done. It's now in Rhino. And I'm going to just delete the custom preview so that it's not in the way. And that's it. That is our definition. That does the thing. From now on, and let me save it actually. No tutorial. Okay, so from now on, everything that I'm going to do is just going to be optimization and making it pretty as well. So one thing is, while this is a proxy, while the tree itself is a proxy, if it's not, by the way, a proxy for you, you might want to consider creating a block out of it. So what are blocks? Blocks are basically when you copy something, it's not going to duplicate the geometry, but it's going to reference it, right? So how do you make a block? Well, if I select my snow now, well, actually, first I want to slap a material on top of it. Sorry for jumping around, but I'll just create a generic material for the snow. Double click it, rename it snow, and just slap that material on top. Because once it's in a block, it's harder to actually attach a material to the geometry. So I'm preemptively doing that. Then all you need to do is just select your geometry. I'm only selecting the snow, by the way. Type in block base point. Select the base point for where the block understands that its origin is. So I'm just going to choose, let's see, this vertex. It doesn't matter, really. And I'll name it snow. Or snow 1 if you have multiple snow geometries out there. Hit OK. That's it. Now it's a block. Basically, this is like 120,000 polygon mesh, right? If I did a forest with this mesh without having it as a block, my file would reach a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, 3 gigabytes really fast, right? If I have like 100 trees, right, with snow on them, that just that snow is going to be 12 million polygons, right? If it's a block and I keep copying it, it's still going to be 125,000 polygons, right? It's just going to be kind of referenced in different positions. Very powerful thing to optimize your scene and to make sure that everything works. So we have that going. Then for the tree itself, since this is, again, a Vray proxy, the representation of it, I'll change it back to low. Bam, like that. Because I don't really need it to be fancy. And I'll make sure to select both of these, like the snow and the tree, and I'll group. Make a group out of them. By the way, one more trick that I would suggest you do in Grasshopper, once you're done, just right-click on the mesh and choose to clear values, right? Just so that it doesn't recalculate when you're changing things and when you're moving things around. And I'm gonna probably delete the rectangle. Okay, so we have this going. Let's render it. Let's see how it looks like. So it's the snow is a block, the tree is a proxy, and both of them are grouped into one group. And it looks like that. I think that looks fine. Just fine. Keep in mind, this is gray material, right? Gray default material, so it's nothing fancy, but it does look like snow. So now, let's create some sort of a material for the snow, just to make it nicer. I'm just going to do something real fast, like probably a fall off. The fall off can be color light gray in the middle. And I want like this kind of bluish tint around the sides like that. you know, something like that. And for reflection, we want to have, do we care about Fresnel? Now let's just do it this way. That and 0.8. And maybe even less, 0.7. There we go. Glossy little snow right there. I should add a bump map to it because snow has bump, you know, a little bit of a bump, but we will not be doing that in this tutorial. Then I'm going to create some sort of light condition, and for that, since I'm lazy, I'm just going to get one from Chaos Cosmos. There are HDRIs available. There's one right here, sunset one, sure. I just imported it into my, this is not a tutorial about it, so I'm not explaining it as much, but I've imported it as my sunset 025, which means that I can now create a dome light. Dome light, bam, place it there. When it asks me to give it a texture, I'll just hit cancel. And instead, I'm going to select my dome light, expand it right here. And what I'm going to do is that sunset 25, right? I'm going to right click on it, copy, go to my dome light, and where it says color texture HDR, I'll paste as copy and make sure to tick mark it. So now my scene is going to be lit by the dome light. And if I hit render, you will see, you know, the difference that it makes. Just give it a second though. Come on. It's super bright, so you can't really see it. Let's make it less bright with camera settings. Exposure value, 14. There we go. Maybe 13. Maybe actually 13.5. There we go. So we have an HDRI image going on. And I'm going to also add like a infinite plane to the scene, just so that there's something, you know, something in the background right there. Like a horizon line type of a situation. So we have a tree, right? And my webcam is lagging. Well, makes sense since I'm rendering, right? We have a tree, we have some snow on the tree. The nice thing is that now we can just take it, copy, copy, copy. And since it's grouped, I can just click on it and rotate this bad boy, rotate this one, rotate that one, put it here, maybe these here, this one right here. Just do something like that. So maybe this one is a little bit taller. This one is a little bit narrower, like so. This one's a bit taller. And this one's a bit shorter. And if it's shorter, it needs to move down just a tiny bit. Just to add some variation. We render again. And we will have our final gather or whatever, our final output done. And that is going to be it for this tutorial. There we go. Snowy. We're done. Hope you enjoyed this one. And I'll see you in the next one. Later.